Mike McCool here in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today I have Stephen Lee Oliver. I know that, well, you're an author, so you got to have a middle name,
Gotta
right?
have a middle name. That's right. But Steve is just fine.
That's good. So today we're going to talk about his new book. In fact, he's coming to Royal Oak Bookstore on the 8th, I believe.
Right.
So Mark, zoom in here and get this cover so you can see what it looks like. Lost and Forgotten. I tried to, I read the little synopsis on the back of the book, and tried to figure out what in the world is this thing about. And I said, well, I'm just going to ask him, and he's going to tell us, and why you should come to the book signing and meet Stephen and hear his story. So tell us a little bit about the book first.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it. There is actually a little connection to this area.
All right. Well, that always helps, doesn't it?
That always helps. It's a toehold, but it's something. My parents had their honeymoon here in Front Royal, believe it or not, 1962.
Wow. Of all the places
of all
in the
the
world.
places in the world. I think it was, a nice drivable distance.
Sure.
They were both working for the government, like a lot of people in Arlington, Alexandria.
Yeah.
And so I've always had kind of that's where my folks had their honeymoon. So the reason I bring that up is because a couple of the main characters often feel like they want to escape from the grind of Washington, D.C. and the whole government complex and all of that, which has its attractions.
Sure.
But it also kind of brings you down a little bit, especially if you're kind of the imaginative type or have some solutions to things.
Sure.
The government sometimes doesn't want a solution. They just want to...
You mentioned the local, when you drive around the Beltway, you see that big sign that says Front Royal,
Yes.
And people said,
They're
thinking, what's going on, and all of a sudden, like you said, let's go to Front Royal this weekend.
Front Royal, it seems drivable.
That's right.
That's right.
It's our great advertising.
That's right. And so it's kind of in a way, it's a journey, an odyssey, I think, more kind of a saga, that the main character, principally, and then sort of a subordinate main character, have. And the journey isn't exactly just coming out to Front Royal or out to this area, but that's part of it, and it's symbolic. The main character sort of has dreams of surmounting all of that, getting out of the bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo and just being a cog in the wheel.
Sure.
If you grow up in kind of a company town, whatever the company is, whether it's the government or coal or whatever, you think, well, that's what Dad did, so maybe I should do that too. Or you don't even really think about it. You kind of fall into it. And that's what one of the characters does. And he's frustrated. And he disappears. So that's kind of the central...
Oh, the lost and the forgotten.
The lost and the forgotten part. That's sort of the central dramatic moment of the story, his disappearance. And the reliance of a friend who basically is his colleague at work. And, when someone passes away at work or disappears at work, someone's got to clean up the papers and get rid of the email address and all that stuff.
Open the drawers and think, what is this?
That's right. What was he up to? And that's kind of the... For people who've watched Citizen Kane, the Rosebud device, it's not so much the sled as just sort of a way to get the story moving. Sure.
Kind of moves it along. Every time I open the drawer, I see something, and I want to... So you mentioned something, there's some celebrity comments I was reading about. So how does that tie into this story?
Yes, there's a couple levels of celebrities. The ones that are most lovable are not the politicians.
Right.
But people like Elvis... or Johnny Cash, kind of the heroes that you have, or that I had, or the characters have growing up. But there's sort of these side character cameos that people of our generation would remember more than the younger folks. Jimmy Carter, Hubert Humphrey.
You think I'm old?
We're about the same, I think.
I said something to somebody. I said, you got the Life of Riley. And he didn't know who, huh?
What's that?
Yeah.
And who in the world is Hubert Humphrey?
Right.
But there's, maybe not quite a chapter, but there are several pages devoted to one of the characters thinking about Hubert Humphrey. And I think that's sort of a way that the character's thinking, well, what did he do that was worth remembering? But is he even remembered?
Right.
At this point, 10, 20, 30 years after his death.
Right.
So, again, it's a device to move the story along, but there's other big celebrity cameos. One of the characters encounters a painting of Pocahontas.
Right.
And that ends up meaning a lot to him at one point, too. So that's, I guess you could call her a local cameo.
Not Elizabeth Warren, but
not the real one. I knew we'd get a political.
That's the first thing that flashed into my mind.
Right.
So is there? So there's a memory in here. Is there a memory? I mean, is it about just? Is it a dream sequence, or is it reality, or you're not going to divulge that?
There's definitely memory has a big piece of it, and without getting too.
We want you to read the book.
We want you to read the book, but without getting too overblown about it. You know how in the Odyssey, the chapters, Homer is telling the story, and the opening line of almost every chapter is "Speak memory,"
right?
Or tell us the story, Homer,
right,
or something
right,
like that.
Right.
And so at first you think, well, it's just going to be a trip down memory lane. That's kind of boring. But after a while, if it's good, you're kind of right there with the hero.
Yeah. It's like a lot of books. You start reading them, and I finish a book in a day, because if you think, well, I can read this big old War and Peace book, in a couple of hours. Yeah, right. And sometimes you do. You can't put it down because you're so engrossed into the story. Yes. And I think that's what a good book's about, is storytelling. I mean, that's really what this is, storytelling. Everything should be to engage the reader, would be some sort of storytelling.
And that's the hope.
Yeah.
That's the hope with this. And it does have kind of that highfalutin title pattern, lost and forgotten, like War and Peace, Crime and Punishment, lost, Washington, Paris, Front Royal, that sort of thing.
So, is this your first book?
That is my first book.
They say everyone has at least one book in them.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting. I didn't plan on this, but the parallels between a couple of the characters and their dreams, and how your dreams kind of get put on hold because you have to pay the bills.
Sure.
And that took about almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
To write.
Well, 20 years is what it takes to become an overnight success.
That's right.
If it's true. You say that, but you look back on people and said, "How long have you been doing that?" Well, 20 years.
Exactly. And it's if you're working for a living and trying to do other things on the side, it's not like I was writing that book for 20 years.
Right.
Years went by.
You were living this book for 20 years.
Yeah. Or I did a draft, and then life intervenes, and you put it in a box like you guys.
And you're cleaning it up, and all of a sudden, I forgot all about this.
Get the dust off of this and work on it again. And actually, the book did evolve. When I was first working on it, it had no intention of being a book. It was just trying to figure some things out, and it had a different working title. Mm-hmm. One of the characters of the book is called Melody, and the main character keeps reminiscing in a sort of useless, nostalgic way about this character, as nostalgic can often be somewhat useless. But then in doing that, you stumble into stuff. Just like, again, the analogy of...
I've opened up a box, and next thing you know, what's supposed to be 5 minutes is 5 hours.
And you haven't gotten
And then
done.
you start, I remember when I did that, and here's a picture or something, and next thing you know.
And for instance, I find things that really are connected to the book. A box of old campaign buttons. Mm-hmm. As a child, I collected campaign buttons like other people would collect baseball cards or football cards.
Well, you live in Washington.
Again, company town. So, you see a button for someone called Birch Bayh or Fred Harris or Phil Crane. Again, these sort of forgotten political characters. But they've got a nice little button, and you think that's, he could do that. Maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of a promising moment in the book when one of the main characters is about 10. He goes to an inaugural parade. And, those are always kind of exciting. but it's also cold.
Sure.
And you're kind of miserable, and you kind of want to go home. But it's a parade, like other parades.
Sure.
And the thoughts that one of the characters have is kind of evocative. And I think anybody who's been to an event like that could relate. But also, I think there's sort of probably the biggest thing that is important about the book for me is that it's in 3 parts. And we've mostly been focusing on the first 2 parts because those are kind of the hooks that hopefully will get.
We get you to the 3rd part, right?
And the 3rd part is the thing that sort of makes the title hopefully more ironic, because I think that the characters find that one of them isn't really as lost as he thought, and certainly isn't forgotten. Okay. And that's kind of what we could all hope for at the end.
It's our legacy.
That's
exactly. That's what people say. I think that's what we kind of strive for, is because you wonder about that. And people pass, let's say, and how long are they remembered? The family remembers them. Then after a while, and after a while, and after a while, we don't.
You go to the grave once a year.
Yeah, once every 10 years.
Once every 10
you don't
years.
go at all. And,
And the characters are often confronting that question. What's this all about? The big cliches of literature.
Sure.
Why are we here?
Yeah.
What are we doing all this for? What's the purpose of all this?
Yeah.
And I think they're struggling with having that courage of putting themselves out there rather than just surviving, just getting by. To have the courage to, I don't know, run for mayor. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And sometimes you find, the candidates that really have some big idea don't usually win. The ones who fit in the most or tap into something that's already there tend to win. But the one with the big idea is often called a spoiler, or why are you here? What are you doing here?
Right.
And all the questions are around that. Why are you in this race to take away votes? Well, I'm not in the race to take away votes. I'm here to do something.
Sure.
Well, that's irrelevant.
You can tell you've lived in a political town.
Yes, and I've seen so many people, and again, that's sort of symbolic. The characters are not political themselves, but they're working within this. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
What's my? I'm not. I can't be Elvis. There's only one of him.
Right.
So, what else can I do?
Yeah. Are you in this book?
There's a bit of me. There's definitely a bit of me, but it's not represented in one character. I'd probably say, again, with maybe the overblown comparison, but when Tolstoy was asked about Anna Karenina, he said he's pretty much every character in different pieces.
Right. You're telling your story through all these characters.
Yes.
So we'll go with that. How's that?
That's fair enough.
So what do you hope the readers will take away from this book?
I hope that for different people it might be some consolation, some comfort, some peace, and maybe it will help them explore their own perhaps regrets and see that, you don't really have to regret that.
Sure.
That got you to where you are.
That's right.
And it's pretty good.
Yeah. It's amazing when you look back at the journey and you look at all the little things that got you where you're at today. You might have had a great plan like coming out of high school, right? And then you dropped into this and dropped into that. And so,
Yeah, that's right. The class president doesn't usually end up as president of the United States.
No. And cheerleaders all get fat. So, I know. That's a story.
So, in answer to your question, I think anybody who's been through that, which is almost everybody, could probably find something to relate to.
Identify to something. And, if you read almost any book, you're right, somehow there's a little piece of each of us in the story because we're so interconnected and we're more similar than unalike, or however that phrase goes. I can't think of it right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
And hopefully there's something that's uplifting.
Yeah.
I know that books are entertaining, and yes, there's that element of entertainment, and I hope it's somewhat entertaining.
Right.
But I do hope that there's some edification for the reader.
It sounds like a screenplay is ready to come out of this book, right?
Maybe, yeah.
That's what we want.
Someone could do it. I don't know if I can. That's a whole different skill set, but I think someone could.
Well, do you have book number 2 already ready to go?
It's about, I'd say it's more than halfway through.
Okay.
I think more and more these days about my writing as a painter might, even whether it's an artistic painter or a house painter.
Sure.
You spend about 90% of your time with the unglamorous cleanup and putting the tape down, the drop cloth down, and the person who's watching you work is thinking, when is he ever going to actually paint? And that's kind of how I feel with the stacks of note cards, the ideas where I'm putting stuff down. And that's sort of the easy part. You could just sort of fill that up. And I've got I'd say about 90% of the raw material that's saved, but I need to go back and
that's what
actually
any project that you do, anything you love to do, you have to do the other 90% to allows you to do the 10% you like.
That's right.
And I think that's true in every profession. If you look at it, that's what happens.
And
so it won't take 20 years though to get the second book.
Exactly. Because I have more time now, and I think by getting the one done, it's sort of opened up the dam, a little bit, because
that wasn't so bad.
That wasn't. You could do it.
You look at it 20 years, and when really you think about really the last 6 months when you really get down to it, and
that's right.
I mean, you think that wasn't so hard.
Yep.
And time compresses into such a short period after.
Yep.
I know the feeling. You asked me how long we've been in this building. I told you 40 years. I'm thinking,
incredible.
It's hard to believe. I was in Washington, D.C., and I came here the day Nixon resigned.
Oh, my goodness.
Was that August something in 1974? Yeah.
I have a picture of me holding that newspaper like Harry Truman.
Yeah, we drove right over Front Royal, our tie to Front Royal.
Mm-hmm,
and we were, in my 1972 Gremlin. See the memories, how they come back. So maybe that's a book,
Exactly.
But everyone has a book in them. I think it's just some don't have the courage to get it out. And think it's, I really am impressed by people that can take now we say the pen to paper, but and get their thoughts down into paper. Of course, we start the Royal Examiner, and it's like, maybe that's my influence that my great ideas I want to get out, right? It's just like you.
And I think that's a very good point. I think that another that leads me to who's the audience for this book. I hope a huge never-ending audience. But in reality, I think the people who could most relate to it, either with the anecdotes or the stories of the characters, are people who have been through maybe a career, or maybe are on a second career or second marriage or something like that, or third, and can look back and maybe relate more to someone of that generation, to those long, almost forgotten times. But not completely.
No, we don't want to forget.
That's right.
I think it's great. Well, we're going to see you on March the 8th. Is that correct? March 8th. Right. What's the time?
It's from 2 to 4,
okay,
and the book will be available, and I'll be there to either give a talk if there's anyone to listen, or to sit there and sign books and talk to.
Sometimes it's a tiny bookstore.
It is, it's a
but
great
it's so unique. Mark loves going to that place. He lives next door to it almost.
Yeah, it's got the cats. The cat lovers should come for sure.
Of course, now the Poppy place next door, now you can go get your book, walk over there, get your copy, read it, go back and get another one.
I didn't know that.
A little cafe right there in the mornings.
Great. So it's the Royal Oak Bookstore, and that's great.
Now you know something great about it. But like I say, sometimes there's lots of people show up, sometimes there's few. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality.
Exactly. And that's why...
the people you'll meet.
That's right. That's why I wanted to go there and to come out here to Front Royal. I'd much rather hang out at a real bookstore with some
definitely a real bookstore.
Yeah,
it's definitely
people
a real
who love books and love to read and cats, and it doesn't have that plasticky feel that a lot of bookstores have these days.
Well, that's okay, but you got to start somewhere. Maybe you'll feel more comfortable, and the next one should be in New York City doing it.
That's right.
You never know.
That's right.
You'll look back 2 or 3 years from now as you get ready to do your second book. of the 100 places you went.
That's right. Well, hopefully, if I can finish that second book, maybe I'll come right.
Well, we
right back.
appreciate that. We've had quite a few people come in from books, and we talk about them and encourage people to go over to the Royal Oak Bookstore.
Yes.
It's one of those little places that we hope are not lost and forgotten.
That's
How about
right.
that?
Nice way.
Yeah,
Nice
thanks
way to
again,
tie
Steve.
it
I
all
really
up.
appreciate
Thank
you
sir.
coming in. Thank you.